My name is Abigail Reynolds, and I am 34 years old. As I walked into the law offices of Grant and Associates for my grandmother Eleanor's will reading, my stomach twisted into knots. Grandma had been my rock since Dad died 10 years ago, especially after my stepmother and her children gradually pushed me out of the family. When my stepbrother Marcus blocked the conference room door saying, "This is for real family only," I simply nodded and sat in the lobby. Little did they know why I could wait so calmly. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you enjoy family justice stories. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. My childhood was defined by the sprawling Victorian estate called Willow Creek. The 6-bedroom home sat on 15 acres of lush gardens that my grandmother Eleanor tended with religious devotion. Those gardens were her sanctuary, and they became mine too. Every weekend, Grandma would teach me the names of flowers and how to nurture them. "Plants are like people, Abby," she would say, her hands covered in rich soil. "They thrive when loved properly and wither when neglected." My father, James Reynolds, was a successful real estate developer who had built his business from the ground up. Mom died when I was just 4, so it was just Dad, Grandma Eleanor, and me for many years. We were a tight unit. And although Dad worked long hours, our weekends were sacred family time. We would garden with Grandma, go fishing at the creek that gave our estate its name, or simply sit on the wraparound porch playing board games until sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Everything changed when I turned 13. Dad met Diana Blackwood at a charity gala. She was beautiful, confident, and came with 2 children of her own, Marcus, who was 15 then, and Rachel, who was 12. After a whirlwind romance, they married within 6 months. Initially, I was excited to have siblings. Growing up as an only child had been lonely at times, especially with Dad traveling for business. But that excitement quickly faded. Marcus was immediately territorial, making it clear that he was the man of the house when Dad was away. Rachel was more subtle, but equally unwelcoming, accidentally damaging my belongings or excluding me from their activities. Diana was polite but distant. She redecorated our home, replacing family photos with modern art and transforming Dad's study into her personal office. Slowly but surely, I felt like a guest in my own home. Only Grandma Eleanor remained unchanged. Though she had her own cottage on the property, she made a point to spend time with me every day. "Blood runs deeper than new paint," she would whisper when Diana redecorated yet another room of our family home. Despite the tension, Dad seemed happy, and I tried to be happy for him. I focused on school, excelled in art and design, and spent as much time as possible with Grandma in her gardens. By the time I graduated high school, I had been accepted to Cornell University's architecture program with a partial scholarship. During college, I came home less frequently. Each visit revealed more changes to Willow Creek. The vegetable garden had been replaced with a tennis court. Dad's vintage car collection was sold to make room for Diana's yoga studio. Even the name changed. Diana referred to it as the Blackwood Estate in conversation, though the original Willow Creek sign remained at the entrance. Then came the worst day of my life. During my senior year of college, Dad was killed in a car accident on his way home from a business trip. The police said he swerved to avoid a deer and hit a tree instead. He died instantly. At 24, I found myself utterly lost. Diana handled all the funeral arrangements, barely consulting me. During the service, she stood between Marcus and Rachel, while I sat in the second row with Grandma Eleanor, who clutched my hand so tightly it almost hurt. After Dad's death, the pretense of family unity completely dissolved. Diana took control of the estate and Dad's business. Though Dad's will had left equal shares of the company to Diana and me, she quickly appointed Marcus to a senior position despite his lack of experience. My attempts to participate in business decisions were dismissed or ignored. "You should focus on finishing school, Abigail," Diana would say. "The business is being handled." And it was into the ground. Over the next few years, I watched from the sidelines as questionable decisions depleted the company's value. I completed my degree and secured a position at a prestigious architecture firm in Boston, trying to build my own life and career away from the toxic environment at home. Through it all, Grandma Eleanor remained my steadfast ally. We spoke weekly by phone, and I visited her as often as I could. During these visits, I stayed in her cottage rather than the main house, where I was clearly no longer welcome. As Grandma entered her 80s, her health began to decline. First came the arthritis that made gardening difficult, then the minor stroke that slowed her speech. Despite this, her mind remained sharp as ever. During my last visit, just 2 months before she passed, we sat in her garden looking at old photo albums. The spring flowers were blooming, and the air was sweet with the scent of lilacs, her favorite. "Abigail," she said, her voice soft but determined. "I want you to know that I've been securing what matters." I assumed she meant her will or perhaps some family heirlooms she wanted me to have. "The gardens must be preserved," she continued. "This land has been in our family for 4 generations. Your father understood that, even if his wife never did." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I know, Grandma. But I don't think Diana will care what either of us want once you're gone." Grandma patted my hand, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "Don't worry about Diana. Just promise me you'll continue what I started." I promised, not knowing then exactly what she meant. 2 months later, she was gone. Grandma Eleanor's funeral was held on a Tuesday. The sky wept a gentle rain that seemed fitting for the occasion, droplets clinging to the roses arranged around her casket like tears unwilling to fall. I arrived early, needing private time to say goodbye before the performance that I knew would follow. The historic church where generations of Reynolds had been baptized, married, and memorialized was filled with flowers from Grandma's own gardens. I had cut them myself the day before, selecting each bloom with care, her prized dahlias, fragrant gardenias, and the special variety of blue hydrangeas she had spent years perfecting. By 10 o'clock, the church began filling with family friends, business associates, and garden club members who had known Grandma for decades. Diana arrived last with Marcus and Rachel, all dressed in impeccable black attire that looked more fashion statement than mourning clothes. "Abigail," Diana nodded coolly as she passed me to take her seat in the front row. "I hope you approved the program before it was printed." I had not been consulted about the program or anything else regarding the funeral arrangements. The service was beautiful despite Diana's control. Grandma's oldest friend, Ruth, spoke about their 60 years of friendship. The garden club president shared stories of Grandma's award-winning roses. When it was my turn to speak, I managed to make it through my prepared remarks about Grandma's wisdom and love without breaking down, though my voice trembled throughout. Neither Diana, Marcus, nor Rachel spoke during the service. They sat stoically, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with pristine handkerchiefs. Their performance of grief continued at the graveside, where Marcus suddenly produced photogenic tears just as a longtime business associate of Dad's approached. The reception was held at Willow Creek, in the grand ballroom that had once hosted my childhood birthday parties. Now it was filled with caterers Diana had hired, serving food Grandma would have found pretentious. I moved through the crowd accepting condolences, feeling increasingly like a stranger in what should have been my home. As the afternoon wore on, I escaped to the kitchen for a moment of solitude. Through the partially open door to the adjacent study, I heard Marcus's voice. "We should list the property next month," he was saying. "The market's hot, and this place could easily fetch $7 million. "What about the old ladies' garden club friends?" Rachel asked. "They're already asking about memorial plantings and nonsense." Marcus laughed coldly. "Not our problem. Once the place sells, they can take it up with the new owners. Your mother wants to wait until after the will reading." A third voice added, Thomas Reed, Diana's personal attorney. "There won't be any surprises there," Marcus replied confidently. "Grant already confirmed the estate passes to Mom as Dad's widow. We're just being respectful by waiting." I stepped away, heart pounding. Though I had suspected they would sell Willow Creek eventually, hearing them discuss it so callously while Grandma's funeral reception was still underway felt like a physical blow. Later, as guests began to leave, I approached Diana. Could we talk about the estate? I asked quietly. I know you're thinking of selling, but Grandma's gardens are historically significant. Maybe we could consider preservation options. Diana cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. This is hardly the time, Abigail. We're all grieving. Of course, I replied. Perhaps tomorrow. We're very busy with arrangements this week. Thomas is handling everything. If you have concerns, you can direct them to him. She turned away, effectively dismissing me. That evening, I was pointedly not included in the family dinner held at Willow Creek. Diana had invited several of her friends to stay, along with Thomas Reed, but somehow forgot to let me know about the gathering. I discovered it only when returning to collect my overnight bag from Grandma's cottage. Rather than create a scene, I decided to spend a few quiet moments in Grandma's greenhouse, the one place at Willow Creek that remained untouched by Diana's renovations. Among the potted seedlings and gardening tools, I felt closer to Grandma than I had all day. On her workbench lay her gardening journal, bound in faded leather and filled with decades of notes about plantings, weather patterns, and horticultural experiments. I had seen this journal many times, but tonight I noticed a sealed envelope tucked into the back cover with my name written in Grandma's elegant script. Inside was a brief note: Abigail, check the safety deposit box at First National. Howard Grant has the key. All my love, Grandma. Howard Grant was Grandma's attorney, a kind elderly man who had handled the Reynolds family legal matters since before I was born. Why would Grandma direct me to a safety deposit box through a hidden note rather than simply telling me? 2 days later, as I was preparing to return to Boston, I received an unexpected call from Grant's office. Miss Reynolds, Mr. Grant would like to meet with you privately before next week's will reading, his secretary explained. He emphasized that this meeting should remain confidential. Intrigued and somewhat anxious, I agreed to meet him the following day at his office. Little did I know that this meeting would completely change the course of my life. Howard Grant's office was located in a historic brownstone in downtown Burlington, where his family's law firm had operated for 3 generations. Unlike the sleek, modern offices of Thomas Reed, Grant and Associates featured dark wood paneling, leather-bound law books, and furniture that had likely been there since the firm's founding in 1923. Grant himself was in his 70s, with a full head of silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had always treated me with grandfatherly affection, slipping me peppermints from his desk drawer during childhood visits and later offering sage advice when I was choosing colleges. Abigail, he smiled warmly as I entered his office. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Once his secretary had brought tea and closed the door, Grant's expression turned serious. What I'm about to share with you was arranged by your grandmother with explicit instructions about timing and confidentiality, he began, unlocking a drawer in his desk and removing a thick folder. Eleanor was a remarkable woman, intelligent, forward-thinking, and fiercely protective of those she loved. He placed the folder between us and opened it to reveal a stack of legal documents. 3 years ago, your grandmother came to me with concerns about the future of Willow Creek. She had observed how your stepmother and her children had gradually taken control of the property and feared that after her passing, you would be completely excluded from your family home. Grant removed the first document, a deed with my name clearly listed as the grantee. Eleanor transferred ownership of Willow Creek to you, Abigail. The transaction was structured as a sale for the sum of $1, which she paid to you. The deed was legally recorded, but held in escrow with instructions for release only after her death. I stared at the document, struggling to comprehend what he was saying. Are you telling me that I own Willow Creek? The entire estate? Yes, Grant nodded. The property, the house, and all 5 acres of gardens are legally yours and have been for 3 years. Your grandmother retained life estate rights, allowing her to live there until her passing. She also arranged for property taxes and maintenance costs to be paid from a trust she established. But what about Diana? Dad left the house to her, didn't he? Grant shook his head. Your father left Diana a life interest in the property, not outright ownership. When your grandmother realized Diana and her children intended to sell Willow Creek eventually, she consulted me about options. As the property had been in the Reynolds family for generations before your father's marriage, she still held certain rights. We found a legal pathway to protect your inheritance. He handed me another document, a letter in Grandma's familiar handwriting. My dearest Abigail, it began. If you're reading this, I have passed on and Howard is explaining our arrangement. Please forgive the secrecy, but I needed to ensure that your birthright remained protected. I have watched with heartbreak as Diana and her children have systematically pushed you from your home and your father's business. James would be devastated to see how they've treated you. Willow Creek has been in our family since 1876. The gardens I've tended all my life are more than just plants. They're our history, our legacy. Diana sees the property only as a financial asset to be liquidated. I could not allow that to happen. The legal arrangement Howard has created ensures that Willow Creek will be yours after I'm gone. I ask only that you preserve the gardens and continue the work we've shared together all these years. Diana, Marcus, and Rachel will undoubtedly be angry. Stand firm. You are stronger than you know, my dear girl. Remember that while money can buy many things, it cannot purchase true love or respect for heritage. All my love always, Grandma. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. The depth of Grandma's love and foresight overwhelmed me. What happens now? I asked, wiping my eyes. The will reading is scheduled for next week, Grant explained. Diana and her children expect it to be a formality, as they believe the estate automatically passes to Diana. They don't know about this arrangement. Will they be able to challenge it? They can try, Grant said with the confidence of a man who had thoroughly prepared for battle. But the transfer was completely legal. Eleanor had clear rights to the property component she transferred to you. We have documented every step and all appropriate taxes were paid. It would be extremely difficult to overturn. Should I tell them before the reading? Grant considered this. I would advise against it. Attend the reading as planned, but say nothing about what you now know. Let me handle the official revelation. It will be easier to defend the arrangement if it comes from me as the executing attorney. I left Grant's office with copies of all the documents and a storm of emotions, gratitude toward Grandma, anxiety about the confrontation to come, and a strange sense of justice that after years of being marginalized, I would finally reclaim my place at Willow Creek. Over the next week, I made several quiet visits to the estate, cataloging its condition and taking photographs. I discovered that Marcus had already contacted real estate agents and that several valuable family heirlooms had mysteriously disappeared from their usual places, likely squirreled away by Diana in preparation for the sale. In the gardens, I found neglect. Beds were unweeded, pruning had been ignored, and Grandma's prized rose collection showed signs of disease from improper care. It broke my heart but strengthened my resolve. I would restore what they had neglected. On the morning of the will reading, I dressed carefully in a simple black dress and my grandmother's pearl earrings. As I drove to Grant's office, I rehearsed staying calm no matter what happened. Grandma had given me an incredible gift. Now I needed to prove worthy of her trust by handling the situation with the grace and dignity she had always embodied. The day of the will reading dawned with an appropriate solemnity, gray skies threatening rain, as if the heavens themselves were anticipating the drama to come. I arrived at Grant and Associates 15 minutes early, parking my modest Honda beside Diana's gleaming Mercedes SUV. The reception area was empty when I entered, but I could hear voices from the conference room down the hall, Diana's carefully modulated social laugh, Marcus's deeper tones, Rachel's quick, nervous chatter. Taking a deep breath, I smoothed my dress and approached. The conversation halted abruptly when I appeared in the doorway. Diana, impeccably dressed in a black Chanel suit, gave me a cool nod. Rachel at least attempted a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, however, made no pretense of civility. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone suggesting I was an unwelcome intruder rather than family. "I was asked to attend the reading of Grandma's will," I replied calmly. Marcus exchanged glances with Thomas Reed, who had apparently been invited to attend, though he had no official role in the proceedings. "This is a family matter," Marcus said, rising from his seat. "We'll handle Grandma Eleanor's affairs and let you know if there's anything relevant to you." Before I could respond, Howard Grant's secretary appeared behind me. "Mr. Grant is ready to begin. He's asked that all parties named in the will be present." Marcus's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, effectively blocking the doorway with his 6-foot frame. "This is for real family only." He sneered, his voice low but venomous. "We've taken care of Grandma and the estate for years while you've been off playing architect in Boston. You don't get to swoop in now." With that, he closed the conference room door in my face. Through the frosted glass, I could see the blurred outlines of people taking their seats at the table. The secretary gave me an apologetic look. "Would you like to wait in the lobby, Miss Reynolds? Mr. Grant specifically requested your presence today." "Thank you," I nodded, maintaining my composure though my cheeks burned with humiliation. "I'll wait." The lobby of Grant and Associates featured comfortable leather armchairs, tasteful artwork depicting local Vermont landscapes, and a small table with coffee and water. I sat rigidly in one of the chairs, back straight, hands folded in my lap, just as Grandma had taught me when I was a child learning proper posture. "When others behave poorly, Abigail," she would say, "that is precisely the moment to demonstrate your own good breeding." As I waited, memories of other exclusions flooded back. The time Diana forgot to get me a ticket to Dad's company anniversary gala. The family vacation to Europe that was planned while I was away at college, with dates that conveniently coincided with my finals, making it impossible for me to join. The Christmas dinner where my place setting mysteriously disappeared, forcing Grandma to insist on squeezing an extra chair at the table. Each slight had been delivered with plausible deniability, never quite overt enough to call out without appearing oversensitive, yet consistent enough to form a clear pattern of systematic exclusion. The office receptionist glanced at me sympathetically as she sorted mail. 2 paralegals walked by, whispering to each other after noticing me sitting alone. I maintained my dignity, though inside I fluctuated between anger and that familiar sense of not belonging that had haunted me since Dad's death. Minutes ticked by on the antique grandfather clock in the corner. 10 minutes. 15. 20. I used the time to center myself, remembering what was at stake and what Grandma had entrusted to me. The legal documents tucked in my handbag represented not just property but heritage, family legacy, and Grandma's final act of love. I would not dishonor that gift by losing my composure now. At the 25-minute mark, I heard the first raised voice from the conference room, Marcus, his tone incredulous. The words were muffled, but the anger was unmistakable. The receptionist looked up, startled. One of the paralegals poked his head out of a nearby office, eyebrows raised. Then came Diana's voice, higher pitched than usual, demanding explanations. The conference room door remained closed, but the voices grew louder. I sat perfectly still, my heart racing despite my outward calm. Suddenly, there was a crash, like a hand slamming onto a table or perhaps a chair being knocked over. Then came the words that rang clearly through the door and into the lobby. "What do you mean it's not ours?" Marcus's outraged question hung in the air for a moment before being followed by what could only be described as chaos, multiple voices shouting simultaneously. The scraping of chairs, more thumping sounds. The receptionist's eyes were wide now, her attention fully fixed on the conference room door. I remained seated, breathing deeply, preparing myself for what would come next. I didn't have to wait long. The conference room door flew open with such force that it banged against the wall, and Marcus stormed out, his face contorted with rage, followed closely by a ashen-faced Diana and a tearful Rachel. "You!" Marcus pointed an accusatory finger at me, his face flushed crimson. "Did you know about this? Did you manipulate that old woman into this scheme?" I rose slowly from my chair, maintaining the composure I had practiced all week. "I think we should discuss this calmly and professionally." "Calmly? Calmly?" His voice echoed through the lobby, causing the receptionist to reach for her phone, likely preparing to call security. You somehow tricked Grandma into selling you the entire estate for $1 3 years ago, and you want calm. Diana pushed past her son, her normally perfect hair slightly disheveled. Abigail, what have you done? What lies did you tell Eleanor to make her do this? Howard Grant appeared in the doorway, his expression serious but controlled. I must insist that everyone lower their voices. This is a place of business. To hell with your business. Marcus spat. This is fraud. Elder abuse. We'll contest this in court immediately. Thomas Reed emerged from the conference room, his legal briefcase clutched tightly in his hand. Diana, we should discuss this privately before saying anything further. There's nothing to discuss, I said quietly, finding strength in the knowledge that I stood on solid legal ground. Grandma Eleanor made her wishes clear. Willow Creek belongs to me now. You knew about this all along? Rachel asked, tears streaming down her face, smearing her mascara. You sat out here pretending to be the victim while knowing you'd stolen our inheritance? I didn't steal anything, I replied evenly. And yes, I was informed of Grandma's decision last week. She arranged everything legally and properly with Mr. Grant's assistance. This will never stand up in court, Thomas Reed interjected, attempting to regain control of the situation. A transfer of this magnitude for nominal consideration will easily be voided as unconscionable. Howard Grant shook his head. I assure you, Mr. Reed. Every aspect of this transaction was handled with meticulous attention to legal requirements. Eleanor Reynolds retained full mental capacity, as documented by 2 independent physicians. The property rights she transferred were legitimately hers to convey. All appropriate gift taxes were paid. The transaction is unassailable. We've already contacted real estate agents, Diana said, her voice shaking with either rage or fear, perhaps both. There are interested buyers. Then you'll need to contact them again, I stated firmly. You were attempting to sell property that wasn't yours to sell. Marcus took a threatening step toward me. You think you can just walk in and take everything? After we've maintained that estate for years? After we cared for Grandma while you were off building your career. Cared for her. I laughed incredulously. You moved her out of the main house into the cottage. You converted her rose garden into a putting green. You hired the cheapest possible home health aide who barely checked on her. Don't pretend this is about care, Marcus. It's about money, it always has been. The receptionist had completed her call, and the elevator doors opened to reveal 2 security guards from the building management. Is there a problem here? One asked, taking in the tense scene. No problem. Howard Grant replied smoothly. Just an emotional family discussion following a will reading. However, if Mr. Blackwood could lower his voice, that would be appreciated. Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides. This isn't over, Abigail. Not by a long shot. We'll fight this with everything we have. You're welcome to try, I responded, finding confidence I hadn't known I possessed. But Grandma Eleanor made her wishes clear, and I intend to honor them. Diana, ever conscious of appearances, suddenly seemed to realize they were creating a scene. She straightened her jacket and attempted to regain her composure. There's been a misunderstanding, she said to the security guards with a forced smile. We're just surprised by some unexpected news. We'll continue our discussion more privately. Howard Grant nodded. If everyone would please return to the conference room, we still need to complete the formal reading of Eleanor's personal property bequests. What's the point? Marcus scoffed. She's already given away the only thing of value. Nevertheless, Grant insisted, we have a legal obligation to complete the process. Reluctantly, everyone filed back into the conference room. I took a seat at the far end of the table, maintaining distance from Diana and her children. Thomas Reed huddled with Diana, whispering furiously in her ear, while Marcus glared at me with undisguised hatred. Rachel simply stared at the table, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. Howard Grant cleared his throat and resumed reading from Grandma Eleanor's will. Beyond the bombshell of the estate transfer, the remaining bequests were relatively minor, some jewelry divided among female relatives, her collection of first-edition gardening books to the local horticultural society, and small cash gifts to longtime household staff. To Diana, She left her collection of antique silver serving pieces. To Marcus, a set of golf clubs that had belonged to my grandfather. To Rachel, a strand of pearls and matching earrings. To me, she left her personal jewelry collection, including her engagement ring from grandfather, along with her extensive library of gardening journals and research. The most substantial remaining asset, Grandma's investment portfolio valued at approximately $300,000, was directed to establish a foundation dedicated to preserving historic gardens throughout Vermont. As Grant concluded the reading, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The reality was sinking in. Not only had Diana and her children lost the estate they'd been planning to sell, but there would be no windfall of cash either. "This is your doing," Diana finally said, her voice quiet but venomous as she looked at me. "You turned Eleanor against us." I met her gaze steadily. Grandma made her own decisions. Perhaps if you'd shown genuine interest in preserving the estate rather than treating it as a cash cow to be slaughtered, things might have been different. "You have 30 days to vacate the property," Howard Grant stated, his tone professional but firm. "All personal belongings not specifically bequeathed in the will should be removed by that time. Any items remaining will be considered abandoned property." 30 days. Marcus exploded again. "Where are we supposed to go in 30 days? "I believe your mother still owns the condominium in Burlington," Grant replied calmly. "And given the proceeds from your father's life insurance and investment accounts, which were substantial, finding suitable housing should not present a financial hardship." Marcus stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "You haven't heard the last of this. We'll challenge the will, the property transfer, all of it." With that, he stormed out. Diana followed, her posture rigid with fury. Thomas Reed gathered his papers and hurried after them without another word. Only Rachel remained, staring at the strand of pearls that Grant had pushed across the table toward her. "Did Grandma really plan this all along?" she asked quietly, addressing me directly for perhaps the first time in years. "Yes," I answered honestly. She loved Willow Creek. She wanted it preserved, not sold to developers. Rachel nodded slowly, picking up the pearl necklace and running it through her fingers. "She showed me how to plant tulip bulbs once, when I was maybe 13. I told Mom it was boring, but..." She trailed off, then stood. "I should go." As she reached the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, Abigail, I'm sorry about how things turned out between us. We could have been real sisters." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with Howard Grant and the weight of what had just transpired. "You handled that remarkably well," Grant said after a moment. "Eleanor would have been proud." "What happens now?" I asked, suddenly exhausted from maintaining my composure through the confrontation. "Now," he smiled kindly, "you go home. To your home, Abigail. Willow Creek is waiting for its rightful owner to return." The aftermath of the will reading unfolded like a slow-motion earthquake, with aftershocks continuing for days. I checked into a hotel in Burlington rather than immediately taking up residence at Willow Creek, wanting to give Diana and her children space to process their new reality and begin making arrangements to move. Howard Grant had advised me to stay away from the estate for at least a week to allow tempers to cool. "Property transitions can bring out the worst in people," he warned. "Let's not create opportunities for conflict that could complicate matters." I used the time to organize my own affairs, requesting a 6-month leave of absence from my architecture firm in Boston and arranging for my apartment to be sublet. My boss was understanding, especially when I explained that I had inherited a historic property that needed my attention. 3 days after the will reading, I received the first legal notice. Diana and Marcus were formally contesting both Grandma's will and the property transfer, claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. Howard Grant merely nodded when I forwarded him the documents. "Exactly as expected," he said. "Their claims have no merit, but they're hoping to pressure you into a settlement. They'll likely suggest that you sell the property and split the proceeds." "I won't sell," I stated firmly. "Not now, not ever." "I know," he smiled. "And we have all the documentation needed to prevail. It may take time, but the outcome isn't in doubt." On day 5, Rachel called me unexpectedly. Marcus is drinking heavily and making threats, she said, her voice hushed as if she feared being overheard. I thought you should know. Mom's not controlling him like she usually does. She's too busy meeting with Thomas about the legal challenge. What kind of threats? I asked, alarmed. Just, be careful when you come to the house. Don't come alone. He's talking about destroying things before you can take possession. Thank you for telling me, I said, genuinely touched by her warning. There was a pause before she spoke again. I found some photo albums in Grandma's cottage. Pictures of you and your dad from before. Should I set those aside somewhere safe? Please, I replied, feeling a sudden lump in my throat. I'd really appreciate that. Another pause. I don't agree with what Marcus is doing. Or Mom. Just so you know. Before I could respond, she hung up. On day 10. I finally returned to Willow Creek, accompanied by Howard Grant and a sheriff's deputy, a precaution given Rachel's warning. We found the main house in disarray, with clear evidence of hasty packing. Several empty spaces on walls marked where valuable paintings had hung. Antique furniture was missing from multiple rooms. We should document everything, Grant advised, taking photographs. Compare with the household inventory from your father's estate. In Grandma's cottage, however, everything remained untouched. Her books still lined the shelves. Her gardening tools hung neatly on their hooks, her bed made with the lavender-scented linens she had always preferred. It was as if she might return at any moment from a day spent in her beloved gardens. On the kitchen table sat a neat stack of photo albums with a note from Rachel. These belong with you. I'm sorry for everything. As Grant and the deputy continued their inventory, I sat at Grandma's kitchen table and opened the top album. There was Dad holding me as a baby, my mother beside him, both beaming with pride. There I was at 5, covered in mud after helping Grandma plant daffodils. Dad and me fishing at the creek, my small hands clutching a rainbow trout with triumphant joy. These were the memories Diana had packed away after taking over the house, replacing family history with designer decor that showed no evidence of the generations of Reynolds who had lived and loved at Willow Creek. By the end of the second week, Diana had filed an emergency motion to prevent me from taking possession of the estate while litigation was pending. The judge denied it promptly, citing the clear documentation of Grandma's legal ownership and her right to transfer the property. On day 17, I officially moved into Willow Creek, taking up residence in Grandma's cottage rather than the main house, which still felt tainted by Diana's presence. That evening, as I sat on the small porch watching twilight settle over the gardens, a luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. Diana emerged alone, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. She approached the cottage slowly, as if expecting to be turned away. May I speak with you? She asked, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I gestured to the chair beside me, surprised by her appearance and even more surprised when she actually sat down. Thomas says we have no case, she said without preamble. He says Eleanor's arrangement is legally unassailable and continuing to fight will only drain our resources. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. I wanted to propose a compromise, she went on. Let us stay in the house for 6 months while we find a suitable new home. In exchange, we'll drop all legal challenges immediately. I considered her offer. What about the items removed from the house? Family heirlooms and artwork that belonged to the estate? Diana had the grace to look uncomfortable. They can be returned. Most of them. Most? Marcus sold several pieces already. The Monet landscape, Grandfather Reynolds' pocket watch collection, some of the silver. I felt a stab of loss, items of both financial and sentimental value, now scattered and likely impossible to recover. I can offer financial compensation for the sold items, Diana added quickly. From my personal accounts. I studied the woman who had married my father, who had gradually displaced me from my own home, who had treated Grandma Eleanor with thinly veiled impatience. She looked older suddenly, the careful makeup not quite concealing the strain of recent days. 3 months, I said finally. You can stay for 3 months while you find a new place. During that time, You will return all remaining Reynolds family heirlooms and provide fair market compensation for those sold. You will stay out of the gardens entirely. They're off limits starting now. And Marcus will seek treatment for his drinking and anger issues, or he finds other accommodations immediately. Diana's eyes widened slightly at my firm tone and clear conditions. For a moment, I thought she might argue or attempt to negotiate further. Instead, she simply nodded. "I'll have Thomas draw up the agreement," she said, rising from her chair. As she turned to leave, something compelled me to ask a question that had lingered for years. "Did you ever love my father, Diana? Really love him?" She paused, her back to me, shoulders stiffening. For several seconds, she stood motionless. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded once before walking back to her car without another word. That night, I slept in Grandma's bed, surrounded by her things, feeling her presence in every corner of the cottage. In the morning, I woke to birdsong and soft sunlight filtering through lace curtains. With a cup of coffee in hand, I walked through the neglected gardens, mentally cataloging what needed immediate attention and what could wait. The rose garden was in terrible shape, the herbs were overgrown, and the vegetable garden had been completely abandoned. Yet beneath the neglect, the bones of Grandma's vision remained, waiting for loving hands to restore them to glory. As I rounded the corner of the main house, I noticed something I'd missed during yesterday's inspection, a small package wrapped in waterproof material tucked beneath the eaves of the house. My name was written on it in Grandma's handwriting. Inside, I found a key and another letter. "My dearest Abigail, if you're reading this, then Howard has executed my plan successfully, and Willow Creek has returned to its rightful caretaker. This key opens the false bottom in the master bedroom dresser, the one your grandfather built. Inside you'll find the original deed to the property from 1876, the complete Reynolds family tree, and my most treasured possession, the first letter your grandfather wrote to me, promising to create gardens worthy of my love. These treasures belong to you now, along with the responsibility of preserving what generations of our family have built. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. There will be challenges and days when you question whether you're equal to the task. On those days, walk through the gardens at dawn. Listen to the birds. Feel the soil between your fingers. Remember that you are a Reynolds, and this land is in your blood. I am so proud of the woman you've become, Abigail. Your father would be too. All my love, Grandma Eleanor." Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter to my chest. In that moment, standing in the morning sun surrounded by the gardens that had shaped my childhood, I felt a profound sense of homecoming, and with it, the certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. 1 month after the explosive reading, Willow Creek was beginning its transformation. Diana, Marcus, and Rachel still occupied the main house, but our paths rarely crossed. Per our agreement, they kept to the house while I focused on reclaiming the gardens. I started with Grandma's beloved roses, pruning away dead wood and treating the black spot that had flourished under neglect. Each evening, I returned to the cottage exhausted but satisfied, my hands scratched and my back aching in the best possible way. Howard Grant had engaged a specialized attorney to handle the recovery of family heirlooms. Marcus had indeed sold several valuable pieces, including a Tiffany lamp that had graced the library for generations and a collection of first-edition books that had belonged to my great-grandfather. Through legal pressure, we managed to track down and recover about 60% of the items. For the rest, Diana provided financial compensation as promised, though the sentimental value could never be replaced. The legal challenges to Grandma's will and the property transfer were officially withdrawn after Diana signed our agreement. Thomas Reed sent a terse letter confirming their decision not to pursue further action, along with an invoice for his services that I returned unopened. Their legal costs were not my concern. With the immediate legal battles behind me, I could focus on long-term plans for the estate. I contacted the Vermont Historical Society about registering the gardens as a historic site. I reached out to the garden club Grandma had led for decades, inviting them to visit and share their memories of the gardens in their prime. Most importantly, I began the process of establishing the Eleanor Reynolds Garden Foundation, using the funds Grandma had left for that purpose. My vision, inspired by notes in her gardening journals, was to create an educational center where people could learn traditional gardening techniques, plant propagation, and sustainable landscaping practices. My leave of absence from the architecture firm evolved into a resignation when I realized that Willow Creek would require my full attention for the foreseeable future. Instead, I began taking on small local design projects that I could manage while overseeing the estate's restoration. My training in historic preservation proved unexpectedly valuable as I worked to honor the original character of both the gardens and the Victorian house. 2 months into my new life at Willow Creek, I received an unexpected visitor. Rachel appeared at the cottage door one evening, holding a cardboard box. "I found more of your things," she explained, placing the box on the porch. "Photos mostly, and some school awards. Mom had packed them away in the attic." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by her thoughtfulness. "Would you like to come in for tea?" She hesitated, then nodded. As we sat at Grandma's kitchen table with steaming mugs between us, an awkward silence fell. "Marcus is moving to Chicago," she finally said. "He got a job offer from Dad's old college roommate." "That's good," I replied cautiously. "A fresh start might be what he needs." Rachel nodded. "Mom's looking at condos in Burlington. She thinks she'll be out of the main house within the next few weeks, ahead of schedule." Another silence, less awkward this time. "What about you?" I asked. "What are your plans?" Rachel stared into her tea. "I'm not sure. I have my teaching job in town. I could get an apartment nearby." She glanced up uncertainly. "I've been helping the school develop a garden-based science curriculum. Grandma actually gave me some advice on it last year." This surprised me. "I didn't know you were interested in gardening." "It started as a school project. Then I found I actually enjoyed it." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Grandma seemed pleased. It was one of the few times I felt like I'd done something right in her eyes. I studied my stepsister, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. Without Diana and Marcus influencing her behavior, she seemed younger somehow, less guarded. "The foundation I'm establishing will need teachers," I said carefully. "People who can connect gardening to education. If you're interested." Rachel's eyes widened. "You'd consider working with me? After everything. We were children when our parents married," I replied. "We both got caught in an impossible situation not of our making. Maybe it's time to see what kind of relationship we might build as adults." 2 weeks later, Diana moved out of Willow Creek. She left the keys on the kitchen counter with a brief note, "The house is yours, as Eleanor wished. I've taken only what legitimately belongs to me. Good luck." A thorough inventory confirmed that she had indeed adhered to our agreement, leaving all remaining Reynolds family items behind. The house felt empty with her departure, not in a sad way, but as if it were exhaling after holding its breath for too long. That evening, I finally moved from Grandma's cottage into the main house, choosing not the master bedroom that Diana and Dad had shared, but my old childhood room overlooking the gardens. As I unpacked my modest belongings, I felt Grandma's presence strongly, as if she were nodding in approval. The first 6 months passed in a blur of activity. Spring gave way to summer, and the gardens began responding to proper care. I hired a local landscaping company staffed by horticulture students to help with the heavy work, while I focused on Grandma's rare plant collections and historic varieties. Rachel and I established a cautious working relationship that gradually evolved into something resembling friendship. She moved into an apartment in town but spent many weekends helping at the estate. Her genuine enthusiasm for the educational aspects of the foundation provided a perfect complement to my focus on preservation. By autumn, we hosted our first event, a heritage apple tasting featuring varieties grown in the small orchard at the edge of the property. Over 100 people attended, many sharing stories of visiting Grandma's gardens years ago. The local newspaper covered the event, featuring a photograph of me beside Grandma's prized Gravenstein apple tree, loaded with fruit. Diana sent a clipping of the article with a brief note, "Your father would be proud." It was perhaps the closest thing to approval she had ever offered me. As the 1-year anniversary of Grandma's passing approached, I organized a memorial garden dedication. The Rose Garden, now restored to its former glory, would officially become the Eleanor Reynolds Memorial Rose Collection, with a small bronze plaque describing her decades of horticultural contributions. The evening before the dedication, I sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the gardens in golden light. So much had changed in a year. The pain of exclusion that had defined my relationship with my step-family for a decade had transformed into something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of peace. Diana and I maintained a distant but civil relationship. Marcus remained in Chicago, making no attempt at contact, which was probably best for everyone. And Rachel had become, if not the sister we might have been, then at least a colleague and ally in preserving Grandma's legacy. More importantly, I had found my place in the world, not as the outsider desperately seeking belonging, but as the caretaker of something precious that spanned generations. The gardens that had nurtured me as a child were now under my protection, and, through them, I would nurture others. Blood runs deeper than new paint, Grandma had once said. She was right. But not in the way I had understood as a child. The true meaning wasn't about biological family versus step-family. It was about the connections that endure, to the land, to heritage, to the values passed down through generations. Those connections couldn't be redecorated away or sold to the highest bidder. They remained, waiting to be rediscovered and honored. The following day, as community members gathered for the garden dedication, I stood beside the rose beds where Grandma and I had spent countless hours together. The autumn sun warmed my face as I welcomed everyone to what was now officially my home. My grandmother Eleanor believed that gardens connect us, to the earth, to history, and to each other. I told the assembled guests. She taught me that nurturing growing things requires patience, resilience, and love. The same qualities, it turns out, that help us nurture healthy relationships and communities. As I spoke, I noticed Rachel standing at the back of the crowd, smiling encouragingly. Beside her was an elderly woman I recognized as Ruth, Grandma's oldest friend. In that moment, I understood that family could be chosen as well as born, cultivated like Grandma's prized roses through attentive care rather than mere proximity or blood. Willow Creek will always be a place where growth is celebrated, I concluded. Where heritage is preserved but not at the expense of new possibilities. Where everyone is welcome to learn, to connect, and to find peace among the gardens that Eleanor Reynolds tended with such love for over 60 years. As the crowd applauded, I felt a gentle breeze stir the roses, Grandma's favorites in full autumn bloom, their fragrance filling the air. Some might call it coincidence. I preferred to think of it as approval from the woman who had given me not just an estate, but the courage to claim my rightful place in the world. I invite you to share your own stories of family legacies in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up for what was rightfully yours? Or found unexpected allies in difficult family situations? Like this video if you enjoyed my story, subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes justice comes to those who wait patiently. Thank you for listening. And remember, the most beautiful gardens often grow from the most challenging conditions.